Welcome on into the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is episode number 20 of season 2026. We got round 5 preview coming up today. It's Gather Round. Everything's heading to South Australia. We're going to be running through all 9 matches with a little preview for all of them. We'll see if we can find all 9 winners. Our tips will be at the end of the episode. Also coming up today, we've got a little bit of an update on the player rankings so far this year. So we'll have the top 10 players from every single position so far this year. So that's all to come in today's episode. I'm John. As I said, this is episode 20 of the year. Gather round coming up. Let's jump straight into it. No need to waste any time. First up, highest rated players after round 4 in the back line. So every team has now played 4 games. This is how it stands. General defenders first up. Got Jack Sinclair on top, followed by Tom Stewart, who was really good last week. Went, I think, at 100% disposal efficiency. Dane Zorko, Wayne Malira has had a great start to his year. Josh Dacos in 5th. Then we've got Joe Fonte from GWS. He's had a great start to the year. Bodie Ulland from Gold Coast. Andy McGrath from the Bombers, captain. Riley Bice from Sydney. And Joel Jeffrey from the Gold Coast Suns. Key defenders. Sitting at top, by far, Cal Wilkie. Obviously, they had the bye last week, St Kilda, so he stays at top. James Sicily has been really good so far. Josh Worrell, I think, is well and truly in contention for All-Australian. Alir had the highest rated game by a key defender, I think, for the season last week. He was outstanding. Had 19 intercepts. Nick Blakey's been really good for the Swans. Ryan Lester for the Lions has been filling in as that number 1 role, while players like Harris Andrews is in off suspended. I was going to say injured, but he's obviously suspended. Jake Lever from Melbourne has been good so far. Mac Andrew from the Suns. Braden Maynard, who has had to play a bit more key defence this year so far, but that might change. We'll see once, obviously, they've got Howe back, once Moore's back as well. And Connor O'Sullivan rounds out the top 10 in the key defence line. Jumping into the forward line, general forwards first. Miller from Gold Coast obviously plays a bit of midfield, but also had spent a fair bit of forward time so far this year. Nick Watson, best small forward, arguably, in the game right now. Pinch hits through the midfield as well. Connor McDonald, similar sort of story. So 2 Hawks in 2nd and 3rd place. Then we got Maxi Hall from St Kilda. Joel Frazier from the Bulldogs. Brian Myers from the Cats, who was last year rated number 1, so has dropped a little bit. But plenty of time to move up the ranks there. Cade Chandler in 7. Joe Richards from Port Adelaide has been really good. Jack Ginnivan from Hawthorn in 9. And Riley Sanders, who has played some midfield time. Obviously, last week had quite a lot of midfield time. Probably will again. We know Ed Richards again this week, but he's been really good. Key forwards, Josh Tracy has been outstanding. Contested player, presents really well. He's been really good. Jack Lukosius is in 2nd, which is probably the surprise, I guess. Jack Gunston's been outstanding all year so far. He continues to kick goals week in, week out. He's been fantastic. Norton in 4th from the Doggies. Thilthorpe from the Crows in 5th. And we've got Mitch McGovern. Sam Darcy, who finally cracked into a good game last week against the Bombers. Mitch Owens from St Kilda. Logan Morris has been good. Ben King doesn't get much of it, but he kicks a goal almost every time he touches the ball, just about. Midfielders. First of all, our inside midfielders. Christian Petrarca, who's currently injured, leads the way. Still sitting number 1 overall. Bontempelli in 2nd. He's been the highest rated player the last 2 seasons. I would imagine he'll probably end this season number 1 as well. Luke Davis-Unaki has had an outstanding start to the year. Very efficient game last week. Not massive disposal numbers, but did lead the way in the match for clearances, contested football, and a lot of other categories. He was very good in as well. Jack Steele, what an absolute steal he's been for Melbourne. Massive in for him to replace that Petrarca and Oliver situation. And he's absolutely nailed it so far this year. If he keeps up that sort of form, Melbourne will be very happy. Nick Dacos in 5th spot. Obviously didn't play last week. Ed Richards, another one that didn't play last week due to injury and is going to miss a couple more games. Then one of our favourites here at All Aussie Rules, Zachy Butters in 7th. Tom Liberatore, another Bulldog that's injured right there in 8th. Justin McInerney's had a really good start to the year. Caleb Sarong in 10th spot. Outside midfielders, as you'll see, the ratings are a lot lower in this position for obvious reasons. Jack Crisp leads the way at the moment, just ahead of Bailey Williams. Jared Berry has been outstanding. Jace Burgoyne might be back to his best. Hopefully we're in for a big year from him this year. Willem Dersma, in his first season, the number 1 draft pick from last year, the West Coast Eagles future star, has been really good so far. Harvey Thomas, Jai Sarong, what a pick-up for Sydney he's been. Braden Cook for the Crows. Simpkin for North Melbourne. And Joshy Weddle for the Hawks in 10th. And then jumping into our ruckman, Maxi Gawn leads the way. No surprise, number 1 ruck in the competition. Has been for multiple years. And it's hard to see a world where he's not again this year. He's been outstanding to start the year. Brodie Grundy was huge last week. Highest rated game of the season so far. In their demolition of the Eagles. He was really good. Tristan Cherry off suspended at the moment. He's top 3 so far. Lukey Jackson in 4th from the Dockers. Tim English rating took a hit last week due to playing about 60% game time and will be missing a little bit of time with an MCL injury. Hopefully not too long, but probably 2 to 4, maybe 6 weeks. John Sweet is next, then Mark Pitternet, Jared Witts, who I think we'll see rise up the rankings a little bit, Tom DeConing, Lachlan McAndrew, in his first real consistent hit out at AFL level has been really good. The big one that's not there on that list right now is Darcy Cameron. His rating took a massive hit last week, and certainly over the last 2 weeks. I think he went from 2 weeks ago 6th spot in terms of ruckman down to 9 last week, and now I think he's in 12. The dual ruckman for Collingwood is making a big change to his game and his rating, so we'll see how that continues to progress over the next few weeks. Next up, we're going to jump into the match previews. That's all the positions done. Make sure you jump in the comments and let me know your thoughts on the rankings. But first off, we lead off on Thursday night footy at the Adelaide Oval. Let's gather round and Adelaide kick us off with a match against the Blues. Not a great start to either team's season. Obviously, Adelaide have had a much tougher draw than the Blues, but both teams sitting at the moment on 1 win, 3 losses. 13th on the ladder, the Crows. 15th on the ladder, the Blues. Just a little information about the ratings I have on there. Offensive rating, defensive rating, and overall. That goes based on our rating system that we use to rate each team each week. Obviously, at the moment, there's not a great deal of data on the 2026 numbers. And some teams, like your Carlton, like your North Melbourne, like your Port Adelaide, have only played easier teams. So potentially their ratings are a little bit skewed. And then teams like Adelaide have had really tough first 4 weeks. So their ratings are a bit lower than perhaps they should be. But, I mean, across the board there, Adelaide still outrate Carlton so far this year. And I think most people would probably agree with that fact. Even if they are 12, 11, 13, we'll see Adelaide certainly improve over the next few weeks as their season difficulty probably gets a little bit easier. Crows have won the last 4 against the Blues, dating back to round 8, 2022 for the last time the Blues beat the Crows. I think most stats will suggest Adelaide win this game. Obviously, the Blues have had that big issue of not running out games recently, and have been in front in all 4 games, and at least 4 goals or so up in each of those games, but haven't managed to run them out, and that is a big issue. And yeah, if they don't have that killer blow this weekend, they're going to struggle because Adelaide will certainly not let them get away with it. They'll make them pay. Adelaide coming off 3 losses in a row, but all close games against teams that we consider reasonably good teams. Bulldogs by 6 points, Adelaide by 8 points, and then last week Fremantle by 2. I don't think there's too much else to go through in this game. Teams have announced teams have been announced for this game, should I say. So we'll go through the changes there. Rory Laird, Isaac Cumming, Mitchell Hinge, and Luke Nankervis all coming in. So 4 changes for the Crows, making statements, I guess. Hugh Bond, Luke Pedler, Chase Jones, and Riley O'Brien all out. For the Blues, some statements here as well. Nick Haynes, well, only one statement. 2 of them are forced changes. Nick Haynes, Zach Williams, and Hudson O'Keefe coming in. Out goes Jacob Wiedering with concussion, Will Hayward with suspension, and the big one, George Hewitt, is out of the game this week. 250th. 2 players play their 150th game, Mitch McGovern and Adam Chera. Yeah, I don't think there's too much else to go through in this game. Adelaide should win. You'd think. They look like they match up pretty well in this one. It's at the Adelaide Oval, where Adelaide have not won for quite a little bit of time. They've lost their last 2 this year. Well, their first 2 this year. They lost both their finals there last year, and I think they also lost their last time in away game. So they might be on a 5-game losing streak at the Adelaide Oval. So it's going to be pretty important for them to get a good start, get their ball moving, and they would be expecting to win this one reasonably comfortably, I would imagine. So we'll watch out for that on Thursday Night Football. Friday Night Football, we stay at the Adelaide Oval, as we do for most of the round. There's only, 4 games, I think, not at the Oval this weekend. And Friday night, we've got Collingwood Fremantle. This will be an interesting game. Collingwood coming off a really poor performance last week. Fremantle, their season started really well. There's no doubt about that. These 2 teams playing some close games, though, so that shall also be interesting. Collingwood sitting 10th on the ladder at the moment. Fremantle 4th. Offensively, Fremantle are 5th to Collingwood 15th. Defensively, 6 to 12. Collingwood's rating took a big beating last week, with Brisbane Lions scoring 119 points on them. Overall, Fremantle 4th, Collingwood 14th. 3 wins and a loss for Fremantle, 2 wins, 2 losses for Collingwood. Recent matches between the 2 teams. Fremantle did win the last one, which was in Melbourne by 1 point. Collingwood won earlier in the year over in the West by 14 points. 2024 they met once, and that was a draw. And then 2023 Collingwood won comfortably. So the last 3 have all been pretty close. Fremantle so far on this season, their numbers look like they should smash Collingwood. Certainly in the contested football and the clearance area of the ground. That's going to be the 2 big concerns. Has been the big concerns for Collingwood so far this year, and they're both areas that Fremantle are very, very, very good at. So that's probably the most important part of the game. Collingwood have already announced that Angus Anderson's going to be debuting in this game. I think that's a clear indication that they're putting a heavy focus on that contested football and clearance sort of game. Also, they'll get Nick Dacos back, who missed last week as a late change. And then Scott Pendlebury is also meant to be coming back in. So a few changes there for Collingwood. They've got to improve quite a lot on what they did last week. I think on paper Fremantle look like they win this game, but this is also the sort of game that Collingwood typically do okay at. They also play Adelaide Oval pretty well. I think they've only lost 1 out of their last 10 or 11 games at the Adelaide Oval. So we'll see how that plays out. They were 3-0 in gather round so far. They've won every year. So we'll see if that happens again. But this will be a tough assignment, and it's one where if they bounce back and do beat Fremantle, that would be huge for them in their season, and we'll see how that plays out. But Fremantle, on paper, should probably be the team that wins this, but strange things happen in football. Next up, we head to Saturday afternoon football and to the Barossa Park for North Melbourne taking on the back-to-back reigning premiers, the Brisbane Lions. This will be an interesting one. North have had a really good start to the year, 3 wins and a loss. However, all 3 of those wins have been against teams that have struggled so far this year, and their 1 loss was also against the West Coast Eagles. Brisbane on the other side of the fence lost 2 games to start the year. Close one against the Bulldogs, got smacked by Sydney, but have fought back with wins on the road to St Kilda and then smacking Collingwood last week. So their numbers, their vibes are all improving. North Melbourne, they've got confidence, they've got form on their side, but now's the time to stand up if you're North Melbourne and put up a really good showing here, because this is not going to be an easy battle. There's no stretching that one. They did meet once last year, which was down in Hobart, and it was a draw. So that was a good performance by North Melbourne. They'll be hoping they can do just as well here. Previous to that, Brisbane had dominated this matchup. 2024 they met. Brisbane won by 70. The year before was about 70. 2022 was about over 100. 2021 was 20 points. 2020, obviously shortened season, they only won by 1 point. 12 points in 19, and also the other time in 2019 they won by 20 points. So a really good record for Brisbane if you take out that one draw last year down in Hobart. Neutral venue here, but it's hard to see Brisbane in the form that they've put up the last 2 weeks. Losing this one, they were absolutely outstanding against Collingwood. Yeah, they're still missing some players, but at the same time they're also just so deep that they can cover those missing players without it hurting their form too much. They've got really good young players. They've got really good players across the park. So it doesn't matter where you try to take them apart, you're going to struggle, because they are very, very good across the board, especially offensively. Defense has been at times a little bit iffy this year. Like obviously that Sydney game wasn't ideal. They conceded 104 there, and they conceded 111 to the Bulldogs, but last 2 weeks much better, 80 and 65. We'll see if the Kangaroos can do that sort of damage to Brisbane. It's going to be tough, but we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll see how it goes on Saturday afternoon. Next game up is over to the Adelaide Oval. Essendon and Melbourne. These two teams met in Gather Round last year at Adelaide Oval, and the Demons actually went down to the Bombers by what was that, 40 odd points, 39 points. But since then, the Bombers have not won too many more games, and so far this year, Melbourne have certainly looked like the better team of these two from what we've seen. Melbourne sitting 3 wins and a loss, on 7th on the ladder. They've managed to beat St Kilda, Carlton and Gold Coast, which was the big one last week. Only lost to Fremantle over in the West so far this year, so that's a pretty good start to their year. Certainly, I think that's above what most people probably expected, and maybe even above their own expectations. On the other side of the fence, the Bombers are 0-4, one of 2 teams that have not won a game. They got smacked by Hawthorn, smacked by Port Adelaide, lost a close one to North Melbourne, and then got smacked early by the Bulldogs last weekend before actually fighting back in that game, but it was a little too late overall. It's a matchup that looks like it should be going the way of the Demons. As we said, Bombers did win the last one. They won also in 2023 in round 5. But 2024 in between, Melbourne did win that one. Overall, 6-4 in favour of Melbourne over the last 10, both offensively and defensively so far this year. The numbers do favour the Melbourne Demons. One area of the ground that maybe Bombers have had a better performance so far this year was scores per inside 50. The Bombers are at 48%, whereas Melbourne are at 44%. But other than that, most other categories is controlled by the Bombers, by the Demons in this matchup. Neither team typically great at contested football, but Demons pretty solid at clearances, whereas the Bombers have been getting smacked at -13 at clearance rate. Time in possession, neither team has massive numbers, but once again, Melbourne nowhere near as bad as Essendon. It'll be, a fascinating watch. Melbourne typically get more of their scoring from turnover, which is where Essendon concede most of their points. So that will be an interesting watch on whether the Bombers can stop that in this game. Obviously, their ratings this year have been quite poor. But we'll keep an eye on it. Hopefully we can see a bit of that determination they showed in certainly the second half against the Bulldogs last week. But Melbourne should be winning this one, you'd have to think. Next, we head across to Norwood Oval for one of probably the best two games of the weekend. Sydney Gold Coast, second versus third on the ladder. Both teams rocking retro tops in this one. Gold Coast Suns back in their pink from last year. Sydney wearing a more white top or white back, I believe. And this will be a fascinating watch of a game. Two teams that are playing some pretty good football. Obviously, both teams 3-1. Sydney have beaten Carlton, Brisbane, and West Coast, losing to Hawthorn in the middle. Whereas Gold Coast have beaten Geelong, West Coast, and Richmond. Not great teams. That Geelong win was a really good one, though, and lost to Melbourne. So make of that what you will. Sydney certainly have the better 1 week form than Gold Coast, who went down to Melbourne last week. But across the year, it's pretty even. Sydney being first in those ratings are certainly helped by the fact that they beat West Coast by 128 points in the most dominant game we've had over last season or this season so far. So that certainly has helped their ratings. We'll see if that levels out a little bit. I would imagine it will. I don't think right now that Sydney are the best team in the competition. I would have them probably fifth, maybe. I think Brisbane, you have to keep up the top in either 1 or 2. Bulldogs up there as well. And then the next 3 are probably pretty close. Gold Coast, Sydney, both of these two teams, and Fremantle, as well as Hawthorn fighting in that spot as well. So probably 3 through 6 at the moment is really close. Obviously, the Bulldogs have got some injury concerns at the moment, so that might affect that rating as well over the next month or so. Yeah, looking at some of the key stats in this one to keep an eye on. Head-to-head over the last 10, 5 apiece. Gold Coast won last year, the only meeting, which was on the Gold Coast. After a slow start, they absolutely dominated Sydney. But the 3 matchups before that were controlled by the Swans. So I can't see either team having an advantage in that regard. Neutral oval. Norwood oval's a very funny shaped oval as well. Very skinny on the sides. Neither team dominate clearances or contested football. But they both do like to have the football in their hands. So that will be a watch. Both teams pretty similar from turnover and from stoppage. But defensively is where maybe Gold Coast concede a little bit more from stoppage than from turnover, than Sydney do. Overall, it shapes up as a very even matchup. It looks like both teams can attack really well. Both teams can defend so far pretty well across the 4 games. Obviously, Sydney's numbers certainly helped by last week playing West Coast, but at the same time, Gold Coast have played West Coast and won by a lot less than Sydney did. So, make of that what you will. I think, based on what we saw last week, Sydney are probably the better team, but at the same time, I think Gold Coast will be better for that run. They came out of the bye. They didn't look quite as sharp as Melbourne, and it was Matt Rowe's first game of the year, so he'll be better for the run. We'll keep an eye on it. I think Sydney deserve to be favourites in this, but I expect it to be a very, very close matchup. We then head to Saturday night football and the second game at Adelaide Oval for the day. And this is maybe game of the round if the previous one wasn't. It's Hawthorn Bulldogs Saturday night football. Hawthorn are going to be quite heavy favourites, even though the Bulldogs at the moment are undefeated this season. A few injury concerns for the Dogs, and that's probably the reason for Hawthorn being such dominant favourites in this matchup. No Tim English, no Richards, no Tom Liberatore. They're probably missing some others as well. I can't think off the top of my head. So obviously Waitman. But yeah, that's going to be the big thing. But this Bulldogs midfield is pretty deep. We'll see who comes in and replaces that. But they have plenty of players that have the ability to go through that area. And it's probably not Hawthorn's best area of the ground either, the midfield. So I can see Bulldogs being good enough to cover it. Obviously, Hawthorn have won their last 3 games after losing the first week against GWS. It shapes up as a really, really fascinating watch this game. Probably more important, I think, for Hawthorn to win it, with Bulldogs being undermanned. Some would argue Hawthorn have had a pretty good run of who they've been playing. Obviously, they lost to GWS, but that was a very undermanned GWS. Week 2, or round 1, they played Bombers, who just are terrible, but we'll ignore that one. And then they played an undermanned Sydney when Heaney and someone else was out injured. Who else was out? Errol Goulden. And now they get the Bulldogs, who have lost multiple players as well. So maybe a little bit of luck. Fortune favours the brave, I guess, for the Hawks, who are wearing a very interesting footy top this weekend. Very, very brown. I'm not sure about it, but good on them. And the Bulldogs, they're 4 wins, 0 losses. They've been really good. Couple close wins against good teams in Adelaide and Brisbane. Smacked the Giants and comfortable enough against the Bombers last week. So I'm certainly not writing the Bulldogs off. I think they have enough players that can go through that midfield to cover the losses. Like, they won't be as good as Ed Richards. They won't be as good as Tom Liberatore, but they can carry their own, and they've still got Bont in the middle. The ruck role might be an issue for them here. We'll see how that plays out. But if they give their key forwards an opportunity with some good ball movement into that forward 50, you've got 2 players that can really take a contested mark in Darcy and Norton, and some decent players around them as well. So I certainly wouldn't be writing the Bulldogs off based on injuries alone in this one. 5 and 5 over the last 10 between these two teams. 4 in a row, though, have gone the way of the Hawks, including the 2024 elimination final. All reasonably comfortable. Well, the last 2 at least pretty comfortable in favour of the Hawks. The 2 before were about 7 points and 3 points. So, yeah, fascinating watch. Should be game of the round, or one of the games of the round. Certainly, if I was recommending anybody to watch any games of football this weekend, I'd be certainly suggesting the 2 Saturday ones, evening one and then the night one. Gold Coast Sydney into Hawthorn Bulldogs is the best combo of the weekend. I think you could tip either team, and I wouldn't be surprised to see either win. I don't think. Alrighty, moving on to Sunday football. We kick off back at Norwood Oval for what is probably not the most appetising game of the weekend, on paper at least. It's Geelong v West Coast. 11 feet 12 on the AFL ladder, but that does not tell you much of the correct story, I don't think, right now. Geelong, obviously, 2 wins, 2 losses. Their 2 losses have been 1 point to Hawthorn last week. Their first game of the season was a bit of a drubbing by Gold Coast, but ignoring that, they've been pretty good. They've beaten Fremantle, they beat Adelaide, just lost to Hawthorn. So pretty solid start to their year. West Coast on the other side of the fence also got beaten comfortably by Gold Coast. So lines up there. But since then, they've beaten North Melbourne, Port Adelaide. Both really good wins, don't get me wrong. But probably not as good a win as the 2 for Geelong in Adelaide and Fremantle. And then last week was a really, really disappointing result for West Coast. They'll be looking to bounce back, but to go down by 128 points against anybody is never ideal. And to follow it up the next week against a team that has been quite dominant against you in recent years is not an ideal matchup for that to come back. It is at least a neutral venue, but yeah, the paper does not read well for this matchup. Geelong have won the last 6. You've got to go back to 2020 for the last time the Eagles beat the Cats. And of those, quite a few have been absolute drubbings. They met once last year, and it was a 43-point win for Geelong. So not massive, but reasonably comfortably. 2024, when they met, it was the final game of the year, home and away season, from memory. And Geelong were 100 points up maybe at half time or just after half time. Only ended up winning by 90 odd, 93 or something. So West Coast did finish off okay comparatively, but still got smacked. 2023, they was a 47-point win to Geelong, and 2022 they met twice, and the first one was 18 points, but the second one was a big margin at about 80 to 90 points. So there have been a few drubbings over recent years. It certainly doesn't read on paper as it's going to be a close game. You look time in possession, time in forward half, both dominated here by Geelong. Geelong not great at contested footy or clearance game, but they are still ahead of West Coast in both of those areas, and I'd imagine that's probably how it's going to go as well. West Coast ball movement has been pretty good so far this year. Geelong's ability to score inside 50, not fantastic, one of the worst in the competition so far this year. But defensively, Geelong certainly looked better than West Coast across the year, pretty much in every facet. So they haven't been great so far, Geelong, I don't think. They certainly haven't been fantastic, but they still look like the numbers should suggest that they should be too strong here for the Eagles, who definitely will want to bounce back from obviously a poor performance last week, like a really poor performance. But it's hard to see a world where they manage to bounce straight back and could compete in this one. I don't think. It's going to be a tough one. It's a tough little stretch because next week they obviously have Fremantle in the derby, which is a game that can go either way. But yeah, they certainly will want to be going in and putting together a much better performance than they did last week. Next up, we head across to Barossa Park for the second game there this weekend. And it's 16th v 18th on the AFL ladder. GWS Giants taking on the Tigers of Richmond. GWS will start massive favourites, there's no doubt about it. Funnily enough, this matchup last year, obviously not gather round, but they met only once last year, which was mid-season, round 12. It was a GWS home game, and Richmond actually had that game all but one. I think they were about 4 or 5 goals up, deep into the third, maybe even into the fourth. But GWS just came home better and ended up sneaking over the line against a very inaccurate Richmond. Inaccuracy for Richmond has been a big concern again this year. Only 1 out of 4 games have they managed to kick more goals than behinds for a match. They started 9-17, 9-6 in round 2, 6-7 round 3, and then 6-12 in round 4. So 2 weeks they've kicked 9 goals, 2 weeks they've kicked 6 goals. It's an obvious issue. Meanwhile, they've been conceding reasonable scores, like reasonably high scores, 128 to Gold Coast, 103 to Freo. Can they beat GWS? Maybe. I mean, they did okay against them last year. This GWS team right now, with the list that they've got healthy, isn't as dangerous as the team that met Richmond last year. I don't know if this Richmond team's got better than last year. At the moment, the jury is out on that. But yeah, this GWS team is not anywhere near as scary as the one that we had last year. They did well to beat Hawthorn in opening round, but since then they got smacked by the Dogs. Only just lost to St Kilda, put up an okay fight there, and then got comfortably beaten by Collingwood, who went on to get smacked the week after. So read into it all you like. I think obviously GWS are the team to beat in this matchup, should be and will be starting favourites, like quite heavy favourites as well. But I wouldn't be that surprised to see a good fight from Richmond. Overall, they have a pretty solid record, 5-5 over the last 10. Going back to 2019, obviously, Richmond did win 2 premierships in that time, 2019 against GWS, and then 2020 they won a premiership against Geelong. So, yeah, if you're looking at the stats and where the numbers lie, and both, once again, two teams that aren't great at contested or clearances, so that's probably not where the game's going to be won. It's hard to spot like a definite spot area where this game's won and lost. If Richmond are to win, they just have to make their opportunities count, I guess. They don't create enough shots, I don't think, to really think that they can win, but they would have to kick straight. If they kick poorly again, like has been their curse over the last 2 or 3 years, they just won't be able to keep up. It's that simple. So that's the number one thing they have to focus on. I think the Tigers kicking straight in front of goal. One game left. Sunday night football. Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide taking on St Kilda. Could be an interesting game, this one. Port Adelaide have had some good and some bad this year. St Kilda probably a similar sort of story. Port Adelaide 8th on the ladder so far. St Kilda 14th on the ladder so far. St Kilda going into this reasonably heavy favourites though, which is in a way a little surprising, but at the same time, Port Adelaide have had some stinking football played by them so far as well. 2-2, Port Adelaide. 2 wins against last week against Richmond by 42 points. It wasn't pretty, but it got the job done. And they beat Essendon 3 weeks ago in a dominant display. Obviously, that loss to West Coast was really bad, and they did get pumped by North Melbourne in the opening game of the season. St Kilda on the other side of the fence, lost to Collingwood, lost to Melbourne, and have lost to Brisbane. So, I mean, not terrible losses, but they only win 4 points to GWS, who have only managed 1 win as well this season. So, things have not started great for St Kilda. I think there's a lot more upside for them in 2026 than there is for Port Adelaide right now, who are just look like they have too many people that aren't up to AFL level. They're relying on too few, I think. Obviously, Zach Butters, you always get a great performance from him every week. But do they need more from Horne-Francis? Obviously, Rose's out at the moment. Aliir's been good so far this year, but I feel like there's just too many players currently playing in this senior team that's probably not going to be getting games at other clubs. So I think that's the big issue for Adelaide. St Kilda still have a lot of improvement to find. I think Nas, Wanganeen Malira, has not found his best form yet this season. He's been good. He has not been as good as he was last year, so he's got improvement. Cat Wilkie's been outstanding. The ruck situation, I think, can still improve a bit more for St Kilda. I think there's a couple forward line players that can probably improve as well throughout the next few weeks. Like at the moment, they're leading goal kickers on 7 for Mitch Owens and Jack Higgins. So we'll see how this St Kilda team develop. They're still learning to play with each other. There's obviously a lot of new faces in this team. So we'll keep an eye on it. We'll see if they can continue to improve. I wouldn't be surprised to see this game go either way. Port Adelaide have a really good record against St Kilda. 8 of the last 10. However, St Kilda did win the only matchup last year to the tune of 17 points, which was also in Adelaide last year, the week before Gather Round. So this year they're in Gather Round. Yeah, won't be surprised to see either team win. My tipping's probably at the moment thinking more Port Adelaide. We'll get to my tips straight after this match, but yeah, I think I'm going to be going Port Adelaide, but it's probably the game that I'm going to change my mind on the most heading up to it between now and the time the game kicks off. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Port Adelaide, St Kilda. Speaking of my tips, here they are for the weekend. These are all the teams I'm tipping to win. So got the Crows over the Blues by 31 points. I think they should be too strong. Fremantle, based on the fact that Collingwood weren't very good last week. Fremantle by 15 points. Brisbane by 27 over North Melbourne. They should be too strong, but North Melbourne have shown some good fight so far this year. They'll be wanting to continue to improve. Melbourne, based on what we've seen this year, should be too strong for the Bombers. I've got them by 29 points. Sydney, in a close one. 8 points over Gold Coast Suns. Hawthorn should be too strong for an undermanned Bulldog team to the tune of 13 points. Geelong should be way too strong for the West Coast Eagles. I got them by 71. GWS, 25 points over Richmond. Don't be surprised to see Richmond put up a good fight in this game, though. And rounding out, Port Adelaide by 5 points. As I said, that is a game that I can see going either way come Sunday night. So far this year, we're 22 of 36. Hopefully, we can maybe hit 9 of 9 this week would be good. First weekend of having 9 games in a round since round 1 and only the second time this year. So finally, the buys are done. We can get into every team playing. That's exciting for sure, in my mind at least. That's our round 5 preview. I hope you enjoyed. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button on whatever your preferred platform for podcasts is. YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. We go live twice every single week. This is our preview episode. And then on Monday, we have our review episode going through every single match of the weekend and all the best players and all the best teams and everything you need to know on the weekend of football. Don't forget to check out the social medias, whether it's X, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. We do it all. We have plenty of content going out every single day on all of those platforms, so go check it out. I'm John. This has been another episode of the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know in the comments if you did. And I hope your team goes well this weekend. Catch us on the next one.